So just a little bit of a rundown for today and some house rules, and then we'll get right into the presentation with Fiona, who thanks very much, Fiona, for coming today. And we'll have some interaction as well. As before, for the house rules, it is a confidential space. So because of that, we're recording today, but anything that's confidential is redacted in the recording itself. So it's all about as well being non-judgmental, respecting each other's differences as you would as a professional, being open to hearing others' ideas and views, because when we have that perspective, we can see things from other people's point of views, and it's really good, obviously, for our practice to be able to reduce that judgment by understanding other people. I've mentioned confidentiality, and also for the NMC code, it's also really important that we act professionally. We will have some breakout rooms towards the end, and we'll organise that, and there'll be some questions that we're asking you to think on. But I'm really excited for this session today, because I know we have a lot of students across universities and trusts that are very interested in their training for suturing, and it can sometimes be one of those things that they sometimes feel they don't quite get enough, or they don't get enough in practice, or equally enough in university. So it's really good to have Fiona here today with us. Towards the breakout rooms, we'll be sharing the feedback form, so please get back to us with any ideas that you have. As I say, we're one big community as midwives, so it'd be really good if people have any ideas themselves about what they would like to present. That's students, again, other midwives in training, and people already doing service change or research. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Fiona. And Fiona, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and again, thank you very much for coming today. It's a very, very important subject for all of us.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me to come and talk. It's really good to be here. So I'm a midwife, and when I was a student midwife, I remember after women had given birth, examining the perineum to see if there was any trauma, and not having a clue as to what I was looking at, let alone know how to actually suture any tears. So this carried on well into being a newly qualified midwife. But at some point, after lots of practice and lots of stress, if I'm honest, then it suddenly clicked, and I could see the different landmarks, and I could also, you know, start building that confidence and feel like I knew what I was doing. So I am a midwife, but I am also a research fellow now at the University of Warwick, and I enjoy researching things that actually matter to midwives and women, you know, things like postnatal care, community care, induction of labour, and now this really important project on perineal repair, and it's certainly one that I can identify with. And in this study, we want to make a difference to students and newly qualified midwives who are developing their perineal management skills. So yeah, my name is Fiona. I'm afraid my name and my colleague's name is a bit a bit difficult to see. I'm afraid that the some of the formatting of the slides has gone a bit skew-if, so you just have to bear with me. So sorry about that. But yes, what you can't see is B Bennett and the end of my name, but that's fine. So the background to the study is that 4 out of 5 women who give birth vaginally will end up with perineal trauma, and many of these will need suturing. Perineal management is part of the core skills that all midwives must have, including conducting episiotomy, assessment of the perineum, repairing first and second degree tears where needed, and referring on women who've got complex or severe tears. Also, it includes, you know, explaining to women what type of tear they have, getting consent for procedures, and explaining what's been done and how to care for it afterwards. As well as, you know, where and when to seek additional support if things don't seem to be quite going right. So, but research has shown that it wasn't just me who initially felt really unconfident and incompetent as I learnt perineal management skills. So what's the problem? And why is this actually a problem? It's because women who don't receive competent care, a few of them can experience long-term negative consequences, including things like incontinence, pain or discomfort, or mental health issues, which can significantly impact their life. So it's really important that we get this right. So our aim in this project was to understand midwives' experiences of how they developed competence in perineal management, and also to understand women's experience of perineal trauma, repair and care. Sometimes we just look at it from our own midwifery perspective, and it's important to understand how this impacts women and what we can do to make it as positive an experience as possible. As part of the project, we also developed an e-learning course, but I'm going to talk about that later on. So this is our project timeline. We conducted an evidence review first. Then a year ago, we did interviews and we followed that up with workshops. And then we developed the e-learning course, which we have refined, and we're now in the piloting and evaluating phase of the project. So apologies for this slide. As I said, the formatting has gone a bit askew. It's gone a bit wonky here, and it looks like I've tried to erase it. But actually, I'm just trying to highlight that I'm going to talk about the interviews now for the next few slides. So I interviewed 14 women. You can see there's a good range across most of the characteristics listed here in this table. Most of the women were multips, and 7 women had babies less than 4 weeks old when they were interviewed. I interviewed 26 midwives, including 4 students, 7 newly qualified midwives, 4 lecturers and 11 senior midwives. And we recruited midwives and students from 3 trusts and 3 different universities. So we used NVivo to manage the interview data and used qualitative description to analyse it. We used inductive coding, which is where we read and reread the interview data and let the participants' words sort of form categories or codes, which we then group into themes, as well as deductive coding, where we fitted the data into a topic we knew was relevant from our evidence review earlier on, as well as the COM-B, the capability, opportunity and motivation behavioural framework. So we had the benefits of both ways of analysing the data, and as I said, we use the COM-B, which is a really good way of exploring behaviours around developing competence and to identify sort of what gets in the way and what actually helps facilitate the behaviour that we want or that we hope to have. So these are our themes that we got from the interview data, and we've put it into a table with the COM-B, there's a lot of overlap, as you will hear shortly, across a lot of these themes. So I'm going to talk about physical capability. So we're talking about basic suturing skills. So this is about students not being able to physically learn the skills at university, such as holding or using the instruments for suturing, because if you can't hold the instruments, you can't suture. So it's sort of a basic learning skill that needs to happen. So we found that students went into the clinical areas, were starting from scratch, and clinicians actually needed to teach them the basics, like how to hold scissors. And the interview suggested that many of the students were actually only having one opportunity to practice suturing skills in the classroom across their 3 years. And some were having to share models or instruments, or the models were sometimes not good quality, or they were unrealistic, or there were too many students for the lecturers to check what they were practicing and to check what they were doing was right. So this was an issue. And this kind of follows on as well. So in physical opportunity, it's actually, as I said earlier, was not having realistic models. It's not having enough time to practice. It's not having enough of the models, or realistic enough models, or ones that weren't falling apart to practice on. So people told us that, you know, they weren't getting enough classroom teaching, or it was not so helpful. So and the timing was really important, because some of them were telling us that they were doing their theoretical information about the pelvic floor in year 1, and they were getting their practical session in year 3, and people wanted those to be together or next to each other to help sort of reinforce the information and be able to take that on board. This was an issue. When students got into the clinical areas, they reported that there were fewer vaginal births. I'm sure you're very aware that the increase in caesarean sections is a real global phenomenon, not just in the UK. But this meant that there was real competition to get the opportunity to observe or get the experience themselves in perineal management. This is combined with service pressure, where staff or units were just too busy for people to get the experience or have enough time for support to learn. And people were saying they just wanted to get someone who was competent at suturing to do it, because it was quicker, and then they could get that woman back up to the postnatal floor. There wasn't the time to actually support students or newly qualified midwives. We talked a little bit about competition already, but there was competition in the classroom because they often didn't have enough instruments or models. They were having to share. But there was also, as we've already said, there was real competition within intrapartum care places, because there were loads of students that included doctors as well as midwives and other people as well, trying to get the experience themselves for perineal management. One of the main facilitator we found was actually for developing competence and confidence was preceptor midwives. Some senior staff were really supportive and helpful too, but actually the preceptors usually had the time, and they were there. They were very supportive for the students and the midwives, and this was a real facilitator to get experience. And obviously for the preceptor midwives, part of their role is to enable the newly qualified midwives to get through their preceptorship program, and to be a band 6. So this was part of what they were doing, but it really worked. People appreciated the support and availability that they had. Many students, I'm sure maybe you can identify with it or not, and newly qualified midwives talked about being really fearful and really anxious about perineal management, you know, including doing episiotomies, assessments, repairs, and of course rectal examinations and so on. So this impacted lots of midwives in different ways. Now, some, they sort of got on with it and felt like, okay, right, I've got to do this, and they went and learned and put themselves on courses outside of university and bought suturing kits and stuff like that. But for the vast majority, they were scared, they were anxious, and it impacted on how they were and in their ability to take up the opportunities that were available. It also influenced some of the band 5s, and they were delayed in becoming band 6s because they hadn't got their competency, their perineal suturing competency. And also influenced where some midwives got a job afterwards. Some were like, I'm not going to do anything to do with perineal suturing that involves perineal suturing, and they wanted to do jobs where that wasn't an option or wasn't a possibility. So it did influence people in different ways. So I want to talk about the women as well, the interviews from the women and the women's voices, and sort of the key themes that came across was the importance of really effective communication and building trust with the midwives who are looking after them, and their care needs as well concerning their perineum. And a few women described the longer term impact of their perineal trauma. So knowing and understanding actually what was happening was key for women. So they wanted to know what was going on. And part of this was actually consent, giving consent for each of the different procedures around perineal management. And this quote is, as you can see, it was implied consent. She didn't realize that she was being asked for permission, and it wasn't obvious, and this isn't really consent, is it? I think you would probably agree, but actually women need to know what they're being asked for to be able to give proper informed consent. I'm just moving on. I'm assuming you're being able to read them. Please button and let me know if you need a bit longer for these to read the quotes. So these quotes, I really like these quotes. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time to read about it. But women wanted to be asked about their perineums. They wanted honesty from the midwife, but they also recognised it was a fine balance for newly qualified midwives to say that they were still learning how to suture, whilst also maintaining the confidence in them to do it and to do it okay and do it all well. So this is something we actually cover in the e-learning course. We sort of concentrate on a little bit in the e-learning course. But I love these two quotes. I think it's a bit sad, isn't it? But women wanted to talk about their perineums. I'm going to give you a minute to read it. So women told us they wanted information. They wanted information in the antenatal period about the possibility of perineal trauma. They didn't want to be scared, but they also wanted to know what they could do to minimise the chance of it happening. In the intrapartum period, many told us that they had little information about the extent of their tear, what the options were. No one actually reported being given options for perineal trauma. Many talked to us about how painful suturing was, and they'd had insufficient analgesia, or they were ignored when they said they were in pain. Some realised that they were a bit out of it in terms of getting information, but they wanted that information later when they were back, when they were when they could retain the information. And lots of women talked about how painful having weeing and pooing was, particularly pooing. Many women absolutely terrified to do a poo and being scared of it and getting constipated and not having any information about preventing constipation or how to deal with it. But that was a real thing for women. And in the postnatal period, I'm sure that you're kind of aware of this, but women realise that perineal care was at sort of the bottom of the list of priorities, but they wanted to be asked about it, as we talked about a little bit earlier, and they wanted checks. They wanted information about how to care for it and how to look after their perineums, and they also wanted reassurance that their perineum was doing okay, that it was going to be all right, that it would get better. I think some of the language that we talked about, we touched on earlier, where women wanted us to be honest, that language that they used, they wanted positive language, they wanted that reassurance, they wanted to know that it was going to be okay, and they wanted to know how to help it become okay. In terms of the longer term impact, a few of the women, and I think there was a couple of women out of the group that we interviewed, really struggled later on. And remember, we obviously interviewed women who were not long after having babies, so I'm not sure about what the longer term impact for them is. But a couple of women talked about really struggling with mobility and with sex. And what was sad is that they didn't realise that they could do something about it, or that there was something they could have referrals. You know, they didn't go to the doctors, they didn't go to triage, they didn't talk to the health visitors about it. And I think it's really important, isn't it, that as midwives that we tell people where to go for help, where to access help when things aren't going quite right, or if they're concerned that there may be an issue. So I'm going to give you a minute to read that, because it's quite a lot of words. So I've talked about the interviews, and now we're going to talk about the workshops and the development of the e-learning course. We're just going to talk about this briefly. But after we did the interviews, we invited people to come back for a workshop. We did three. We did 3 2-hour ones. One was just for women, one was just for midwives, and we did a joint one as well. And we had lots of different people who came to that, which was really helpful to present what we had found through the interviews, all of the interviews, put the information all together. And they confirmed what we were finding, the kind of themes, so that was really, really helpful. And we also talked to them about the e-learning and developing the e-learning course. So the e-learning course is on the RCM website. It's in the iLearn section, and we co-designed it. So the study team and the RCM had some involvement, and they were brilliant at helping develop the actual e-learning package itself. So I've just taken a few screenshots from the e-learning course, and we've tried to make it interactive and to include a variety of different learning methods. But if you're an RCM member, obviously you need to log into the RCM, then you go to the iLearn, and you can find the course under What's New in iLearn, or you can browse the modules A to Z, and you click on F for future suture or P for perineal care, and either way then you just click on it, and you should be able to just go straight into the course. So we're currently in the piloting and evaluation part of the Future Suture project, so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about this bit now. So we want to, as it's a new course, we want to evaluate it, and we want to make it as good as possible. And to do this, we're asking third-year student midwives and newly qualified midwives to complete the course, but also to do a little survey. It's a little survey just before and a little survey just after the e-learning package. And we're also hoping that they will come back 3 months later and do another little survey, because we want to see, is it having an impact, if they still remembered it, that kind of stuff. We need lots of participants. We need as many as possible. So if you fit the criteria, if you're a third-year student midwife, or if you know newly qualified midwives, we would love you to consider taking part yourself, or to share it with other people who it may be relevant for. So the course focuses on 3 areas. It's the emotional response to suturing, women-centered communication. I'm sure you're not surprised about that after hearing the quotes from the women and asking for support. So some of these topics have got a much wider application to other aspects of care or even life, actually, as well as communicating your needs in a respectful manner, particularly in the clinical areas. I've actually learnt loads from it about communicating in general. We are also offering a few participants who've completed the e-learning course to take part in interviews, which we will be starting in the next few weeks. So we've already started our evaluation, but we want as many people as possible to come through and to do the course and do the survey, take part in the evaluation. So in summary, evidence tells us that some students and midwives lack confidence and competence in perineal management. To help support them as they develop confidence and competence, we have co-designed an e-learning course in perineal management, and it complements the iPearls course, which you might have heard of. So they're not in competition with each other, they're kind of, you know, they work beautifully together. We're currently in the pilot stage of piloting and evaluating the e-learning course, and we want as many people as possible to take place. So we would love it if you would consider taking part yourself, if you're a third-year student midwife, or if you're a newly qualified midwife, and if you are a member of the RCM.